Hey guys, whatever you do not try this at home. Yeah, don't ever try that. Okay, so I think it's worth mentioning that mini drones, like how DJI has made their Mini 2 and now the Mini 3 Pro, I think the whole point of making mini drones is to keep it under the weight limit of 250 grams. So that's why you do get the labeling of 249 grams, and that is because how you don't need to register your drones. And from my experience with the Mavic 3, this is tiny compared to the Mavic 3. Mavic 3 was the same size as the Mavic Pro, but yeah, that had 5.1K, dual sensors, and the Hasselblad 4x3, if I'm not mistaken, 4x3 inch sensor, and this has a 1/1.3 inch sensor. And so far, I am loving how the image quality is coming out, and especially paired with the smart controller. I mean, it does not compare to using your phone and connecting it with a controller. There's so many mistakes that can happen during flight, like getting a phone call or text message. So it's nice that the Mini 3 Pro does come with a set of a controller, but this is a separate purchase if you are wondering. This is about $150 extra. You can buy the aircraft separately, but I'll get into the pricing later. But for now, I just want to mention a bit about the specs. There is a new firmware update again, which allows video captures up to 4K 60 and high frame rates of 120 frames per second at 1080p. Among other features added, such as added focus track, true vertical shooting, hyperlapse, master shots, quick transfer, and panorama mode are also included, as well as software patches for its advanced pilot assistance systems, or APAS as they call it, for better flight responses and flight stability. So be sure to have all of those updates installed inside the drone before flying, especially if you consider how small this drone is. Knowing how wind speeds might just push it away. I had an experience in doing the dumb mistake of flying inside indoors, and there was a fan blowing and it actually hit into my arm. I'm still new to drones. If you haven't watched the Mavic 3 video, so do please check that out. I had my own incidents in that video, but I'm doing my best to not have any more accidents in this. Unfolded, it's still only about 171 by 245 millimeters in size, and very much pocketable. You can fold this up and keep it in your pocket if you want to. But yeah, the fact that it doesn't come with a muzzle or strap like how the Mavic 3 did, yeah, you might break the propellers, and I think that's my only concern if I were to keep this in my pocket or just a bag without any of its protections. Always stay protected, kids. But yes, this is not ideal to keep it in your bag. At least I don't have the confidence to put it in my bag without having any anxiety about breaking the propellers. But fun fact, if you were to break the propellers, you can replace one propeller each. Instead of it coming out that way, you can just replace one. So that's a neat feature that the Mini 3 does. As for flight improvements, very minute compared to the Mini 2, with same max speeds as before of 16 meters per second, or about 57.6 kilometers an hour. Still pretty much quite fast for a drone this small. And also a max ceiling height reaching up to 4,000 meters as it did in the Mini 2. But where improvements may count is the wind resistance. There is a slight improvement in the wind resistance, being able to handle speeds up to 10.7 meters per second or 38.52 kilometers. And yeah, again, for a drone this size, see, it's so small. It fits my palm, if you're wondering how small that is. Yeah, the controller is a 5.5 inch display, set to have a peak brightness of 700 nits. My experience with it lately has been flawless. I love how it's just built into the controller. You can buy the smart controller that DJI also sells. For now, that does not have any pairing capabilities with the Mini 3. If you were to consider buying one of those, if you already have one of those, yeah, that smart controller cannot be paired with the Mini 3, at least for now, until there's new firmware updates. I mean, all of this is running on software anyways. Okay, so camera specs. This little guy here, right here, f1.7 48 megapixel, 1/1.3 inch sensor, and does resolutions of 4K, 2.7K up to 60 frames per second, and HDR modes that's only supported up to 30 frames per second. From what I can see, HDR works really well up to 30 frames. Anything above that, you do get a smoother image. There is a higher chance of capturing more highlights when shooting above 30 frames per second. Something about clarity is just better at 30 frames per second, but I can only attest to this later on once I'm reviewing the footage. Yeah, interestingly, how the cutout of the camera here, it has this bit of a cutout here. This is to improve variable angles. So instead of having a roof over the camera, which doesn't allow the camera to pan up or tilt up, because of this small cutout, now you can tilt the camera a bit further up than normal, which is such a nice addition that they've added into this drone. And I really hope that they consider adding it to more of the drones, having that tilt up flexibility. Yeah, this is by far the coolest thing that they have added into this Mini 3 Pro. But if sensors are concerned, it still has tri-directional obstacle avoidance sensors for forward, backward, and downward, and sort of misses out on side sensors, but relatively it doesn't really need extra sensors on the side because of how small this drone is, and relatively the sensors at the front and the back is quite big for its size, so I don't think so it needs a side sensor. The way it manages heat, so far I've experienced it getting very hot to the touch before, but that's probably because of how Malaysia is very hot to begin with. Today is quite unlucky because it's slightly cloudy and the sun just doesn't want to pop out. So I will be trying out some other features like the auto track and also the helix and all of the other features that's built into this drone. So yeah, let's get to all of that, and we will then talk a bit more about image quality as we always do. So yes, let's get flying. Okay, so in this Fly More kit, you do get three batteries, and it pops out just like that. And in a new one, and you're ready to go. I didn't get any ND filters for this shoot. DJI didn't send any, but there is ND filters available for the Mini 3 Pro, and it just snaps off just like all the other DJI drones do, so that's very neat. And if you're short of a power bank, this can actually be a power bank. Just to mention how small this drone is, it's tiny. It's smaller than the remote control. I love how auto takeoff is just a thing now in all DJI's drones, and it makes things so much easier. Okay, winds are quite strong right now, So yeah, for something this tiny, it's just really impressive. Although the footage might not be as stable as you want it to, but frankly, that's just a given for how small this drone is. I mean, as long it's staying stable, it's hard to tell whether the footage is shaky or not. I mean, the gimbal does a lot of the work keeping the drone as stable as possible, but currently right now I can feel the wind draft pushing this drone a bit to the left and doing my best to counteract the wind speeds. As for ceiling height, I did mention it goes up to 4,000 meters and ascent speeds of 5 meters per second. Okay, so DJI does mention about how it does 47 minutes of flight time, but relatively you are looking at 30 minutes or so, just because you want that extra time to come back to where you are. And I'm already at 34% on my second battery. I think I just want to give the, oh my god, I'm sweating. Ew, so sweaty. Yeah, I just want to test out the auto track feature where I don't really have to put any input, just walking right now. I'm not doing anything right now, it's just moving with me. But yeah, if I were to just fly backwards, it would still keep me in the frame. And if I were to use active track, using it parallel and just walk with the drone moving forward, and it's just keeping my movement stable as much as possible. But with that, and now I'm gonna cancel it, and now I'm just gonna fly. It really goes though. It really goes. Even for a small drone like this, it's okay. Now it has to come back. Oh my god, that was so close. Yeah, battery life was dying on me right there, and I was pretty much scared out of my life for it because there's nothing but water here. So if it lands in the water, that's 2 drones already I'm burning off. But yeah, one thing I do notice, it does drain the battery a lot. I think that's just because of how small the drone is, and it's counteracting with the wind and yeah, keeping it stable and all of that. It does a lot of the work. The motors in the propellers, yeah, they do a lot of the work in keeping this drone up in the air, and I think that's the main factor as to why it drains a lot of the battery. And I'm already gonna switch out to my 3rd battery. There is a battery plus. I'm not entirely sure what the full name is, but essentially you will get a bigger battery capacity, and that has a limit of 3,000, a maximum ceiling of 3,000 meters. That's just because of the battery is a lot heavier and it doesn't support the weight as well as the normal batteries that come with the Mini 3. But yeah, I just mentioned earlier, you want extra flight time just to get yourself back. If not, you know how it goes, you're gonna crash. Okay, so yesterday we did end up running out of battery. The drone was about to land in the water, so just gonna try and have it on a safer space, which is on a rooftop, and we're gonna try and get that helix motion. That's part of the features in the DJI Mini 3, but also all of the new drones. This is all because of the new firmware updates that's available. Yeah, do update to the new firmware. Okay, yeah, so adding on to the talking points I had on the rooftop, I could not use any of that footage because it was just overexposed. My friend was handling the camera, so apologies for that. I'm just gonna add on the talking points here while we review some of the footage. But the first thing I do want to touch on is that I could not find a decent like LUT an official decent light for the Mini 3 Pro. Color grading this without a LUT might be cumbersome, but the footage on the lake, I shot that in manual mode, so it was slightly overexposed and it was already relatively hard to try balance out the colors. But if it's in auto mode does wonders. It's more than enough to capture high dynamic range, considering that if you shoot 25 or 30 frames per second, it's already shooting in HDR. So you will get a lot of latitude in the dynamic range. And yeah, I'm loving how it comes out without any post-production color grading. So, but yeah, going back to the rooftop, using the active track. Active track was something I already experienced in the Mavic 3, and that was relatively very easy to understand, and it's the same thing here. It takes a lot of the inputs of a pilot, and just all you have to do is just fly it forwards, and it works flawlessly here again, and always a nice feature to have. But I do want to touch a bit on that camera cutout, that having the ability to tilt up helps or gives you more possibilities of whatever you can capture, flying under the bridge and everything, just like how I am right here. Yeah, let's touch on the advantages of having a small drone, like the examples of the skate park. The skate park is relatively in a covered space with a roof, so ideally flying a small drone is the best, and I managed to get all these footages without the fear of flying into anything or obstructing anyone's skate time or experience because of how quiet it is. And yeah, when you fly a drone this small in a space this big, you'll have the confidence to fly it around. And when I'm flying it from parallel left to right, it managed to keep up with the skaters here, and it almost looks like it's on a dolly. And that's a high compliment by any means. It's very easy to fly. This was in 25 frames per second, and yeah, you do get more of that motion blur. Ideally, shooting this in 60 frames per second would have been nice, but this was before I updated the new firmware, so there were some instabilities of flight. I guess that's how I ended up injuring myself flying it indoors, but that's just pilot mistakes or user error. So yeah, on its own, the drone was fairly good to its own respect. But touching on true vertical video, this is the best camera you can get shooting in vertical. That, as far as I know, no other drone does this. And I do have to mention that this feature won't allow you to shoot using active track. So this is a movement where I am controlling on my own, and sadly there's no active track in this. But again, software is always the answer to everything, and all you have to wait is for a firmware update. But yeah, having Mini 3 Pro, I could easily stack it up with an Air 2S, and to some extent even the new Mavic 3. Even though the Mavic 3 has a bigger sensor and yeah, it's just a bigger drone anyways. But if I were to pair this side by side, doing a blind test, it would be very hard to distinguish between the two. It does more than you could ask for as a camera and a drone, to say the least. Image quality is amazing. So, what are my final thoughts of the DJI Mini 3 Pro? Well, for instance, it is, again, very, very small, and for the fact of that being a very small drone, you can essentially fly this in more places than you would normally are able to fly in. Like for instance, in flying in the skate park, I would not be able to have the confidence to fly a bigger drone in that type of space, nor in a space like my studio here. As far as how it handles as a drone, and if it deserves the pro name inside it, I would say yes, it does deserve a pro name. Knowing how well it handles itself in very high winds and just the ability to capture very high dynamic range footage. In terms of how this compares to a Air 2S, which is priced at $999 for just the aircraft alone, or $1,299 for the Fly More combo. The Air 2S does about 19 meters per second, about 68 kilometers per hour, so you do get a bit more speed there, about 20 kilometers extra, and has a max height of 5,000 meters as compared to 4,000 meters in this drone, the Mini 3 Pro. But in terms of max flight time, it's sort of similar. It gets about 30 minutes flight time. But I do suggest, if you were to get this drone, I suggest getting the intelligent battery, which is, sorry, Intelligent Flight Battery Plus. That's what DJI is calling it. And it gets you up to 47 minutes of flight time. Yeah, most of the time I wish I had a bit more battery life, just so I could get a bit further and not have that anxiety of having to fly it back. Yeah, in situations when you're flying above a lake or somewhere near water, or just somewhere where you don't want to land. So yeah, having a bit of extra battery life makes the biggest difference. For the pricing of the Mini 3 Pro, the aircraft alone costs $669. With the normal RC, the remote control, the normal RC, not this one, that costs $759. But with the DJI RC, with the 5.5-inch screen, this combo costs $909. Also with the Fly More combo, which I have with me, that gets you extra propellers, and the extra batteries will get you about $189 extra. The kit plus, the Fly More combo kit plus, that will set you back another $249. But I do suggest getting the Intelligent Flight Battery Plus, as I mentioned just now. So yeah, overall thoughts about how this handles. I would probably choose to get the Air 2S as compared to the Mini 3. I know the Mini 3 Pro is the more updated version and the 2S is a bit outdated, but having that extra height does make a difference in some occasions. But as if I were to choose it between the Air 2S and this, in terms of how portability this drone has, how it doesn't get that much attention when you're flying it because this is very, very quiet, then yeah, probably I would choose the Mini 3 Pro. If you already have a full line of DJI drones, and if you just choose to get a Mini, and if you don't have a Mini, then yeah, I suggest do get the Mini 3 Pro, because it's a very good drone. I do get a bit of fear of flying this in high speeds or high winds, just because of how if you see it physically, it really looks like it's struggling, but if you're looking at the screen, the gimbal does very well at stabilizing all of your footage. It does overheat sometimes. It doesn't notify me that's overheating, but when it lands, once it's landed, it's always very hot to the touch. And if there is no fault in terms of how it manages temperatures, then I don't have any other comments on. Pros outweigh the cons, obviously, right now. And yeah, this is perfected to the T. I didn't get to test this drone at night, but considerably knowing it is an f1.7, I'm sure it would have done good as well. Yeah, the cameras on these drones have gotten insanely good. It also has that true vertical shooting feature. So if you're planning to just upload this directly to social media, then you already have that advantage like no other drone has. But yeah, that is my full review of the Mini 3 Pro. And yeah, if you have any questions about how the experience of this drone, if I had discovered anything that I might not have mentioned in this video, do let me know and just ask me any questions. And thank you for watching up to this end, and I hope to see you guys in the next video, and see you soon. Peace.